doing wonderful. How are you doing, Joey?
I'm doing all right. That was the daddy intro right there. Hi.
Hi.
And then I have the worst member of the Wise Guys, Danny Wynn. What's up, Danny?
Hey, what's up?
Yeah, no, not even like a witty retort to
No, I'm used to the toxicity.
that. I am pretty toxic. That's big facts. But yeah, so I mean, I want to get these two guys tonight because Danny. I mean, I've gotten to know Danny pretty well over the course of the past like few events that I've been going to, which has been super awesome. I'm gonna rash on Danny a lot tonight for a few reasons, but yeah, it's all love. I love that guy, and I actually got to Matt's like a new member to Shenron's Lair, and I got to really connect with him this weekend, and that was really awesome too. So I wanted to get these guys on here. I want to get a whole lot of different people from the community on this podcast. So I figured I'd wrap these two guys up tonight. So yeah, I mean, I just want to go over kind of the weekend and what you guys thought about it. Whether you guys had a good time, whether the format was to your liking, where you think it might go from here. So to recap, coming off the weekend, I feel awesome, man. Like I had such a great time that weekend, like hanging out with the Shenron guys at the Airbnb. Even though I didn't do as well as I wanted to at the tournament, I mean, I had a great time, and I haven't had this great weekend in a while. And I came back to my house. I went to school the same morning. Got back from my flight, got home from school, did some homework, got the new Pokemon Let's Go game, and I just feel super super ready for Thanksgiving. So I'll pass the talking stick to Matt. So I know you kind of did your whole video about this already, but if you want to give a couple words about your thoughts on how the weekend was.
Yeah, no, so it was also spending time with the Shenron boys and then figuring out that we were staying next to the Wise Guys. So that means I got to be approximately 12 feet away from Danny Bay, which is the best feeling ever. And then on top of that, preparing for the event itself was a lot of fun. The event itself, I think the format was super diverse, but pretty volatile from a competitive player perspective, because it's like hard to pick what deck you wanted to play, because if you just ran into the wrong string of matchups, you could just have a bad day.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, so that part was kind of like frustrating, but at the same time, the format was super diverse, which was awesome. And then getting back, like the weekend was so amazing that when I got back home and I wasn't with everybody anymore, it was like so sad for a minute, because I was like, man, I'm not gonna see all these guys.
I know
for a while, like, and it just sucks because like everyone in Shenron's is like brothers. Me and Danny Wynn hugged like 8 times before he left. like it's rough, man. But no, the weekend was amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Danny, recap a little bit for you, and then we'll actually get into how you did it during the weekend. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, no, seriously, like I can't say it enough. I said it on Facebook a few times. It was really, really nice seeing everyone from like California. I was really happy to finally meet like all the Shenron's Lair. It was just like great, and seeing Matt is always every single time. I've seen him every event for a while, like several events now, and it's always great seeing him. Joey, I see you all the time. Who cares?
I see you too much, dude.
But that felt pretty good for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Matt brought up the volatile kind of environment, the format, in the sense that it's very, very hard to pick a deck, because a lot of decks had auto loss matchups, and realistically the only one that didn't, I would say, was probably Storm. Cell Chain, to an extent, I don't think necessarily had a popular auto loss matchup. I think it loses really hard to Chain Zeno. I think we can all agree on, but I don't necessarily know how much Chain Zeno was represented at that tournament. I would probably say it was not super duper popular. But Danny, how did you come to the decision to play your deck at that weekend?
Oh, I'm a genius, and I came up with all 65 cards that were in my deck.
Dude, you're so pro, dude. But
but
go ahead.
Yeah, of course. It was like the Thursday before Nats, no, the week before Nats, that Thursday, hung out with you at a tea shop, and usually like I didn't even bring my cards because I wanted to discipline myself to not go to a bad, not a casual locals. I wanted to play test online. And you're like, yo, let's meet up. You handed me this deck. You're like, oh, this is fun, dude. I'm like, oh, nice. And I was like, Jesus, this is ridiculous. And then I took the deck pretty much and made it my own. And Matt had a little, he had a few cards, contribution.
A pretty important one, if I do recall. I think me and Matt both have signature cards in your deck. Like, you should have like each of us sign like the copies. Like Matt's card was Android 16. That card was pretty nuts.
Yeah, for sure.
It's one of the best cards you could probably Child's Wish back.
Yeah, I was just coming to the Discord one time and he showed me this green yellow deck and I'm like, what is going on? And I was like, this looks so garbage. And I'm like, and I saw Android 16 and explosive. Like, if you just play like 4 of them really fast, that's pretty good.
Seems legit. And then of course, that fledgling talent Pan. I live and die by that card in Shenron. Like, that's, to me, that's like Matt says, peanut butter and chocolate. Like, it just goes together. but anyways, so I'm actually surprised you ended up like finally going with that deck as your final pick for the weekend. It's kind of interesting because like we just said, it does have a really scary matchup, and luckily you didn't have to face it too much. But were there any other decks you were considering taking for the weekend?
No, because like the past like several regionals that I've gone to, I've like heavily like disciplined myself to, once I decide on a deck, and which is I usually try to decide on it a week before, or at least like the weekend before, and then I just like, all right, this is it. Unless something like some broken ridiculous deck comes by, I'm not gonna change, because I want to know every single matchup and know the ins and out, every single card in my deck, and how I should approach every possible matchup. So I think that's just the best way to, approach a tournament.
That's very fair. Yeah, I mean, knowing a deck in and out, like that's how our teammate Tim did so well with Pan. He's been playing Pan since like set 3, and he's been adapting every single format. So I definitely can believe that. So we had nationals a week after basically the set dropped, which a lot of people were testing online, especially people on different teams. That's really popular amongst teams. So the format wasn't necessarily solved yet, and I think people were looking at Shenron's Lair to kind of be the first people to really crack it wide open and come up with a Demigrog again, or come up with a Storm again. So what do you think about the format in terms of can it be solved? Like, is this the potential of the format? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think the keys of the format are pretty simple. It's just you have the really fast deck, which is just Hirudegarn and Storm, and then you have the best control deck, which is like Shenron Gogeta at the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yep.
And then the thing is about having those two decks as your two main decks is that there's so many different things that fall into the middle that can either counter one of the strategies or just be generically good on its own. So for instance, take a deck like Janemba. Janemba is like, it's a deck that is just the balancing deck of the format, because it's just a straight line. It does one thing, one really powerful thing, and it has its own win condition, and it's kind of right in the middle. And then you have stuff like Pan that is able to, counter the big Shenron decks, because the Shenron decks require on either building a big board state with big creatures or using little guys in Child's Wish decks, and then that kind of leans towards that side, but has a bad matchup against Storm. Whereas Droids has a better matchup against Hirudegarn and the rest of the field, but then Droids loses pretty hard to Shenron decks. So it's like this interesting paradigm where, since you have these two really oppressive decks at both ends of the spectrum, that they create so much room for everything else to be in between. But I mean, going into the weekend, it pretty much came down to me where like I was either going to play a blue-yellow base Shenron deck, because I think Battering Laser is just one of the key cards of the format.
Oh, it's the stones. It's so good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, or I was gonna have to play something I didn't want to play, which I ended up doing, which was Storm. And so the reason why is because all the data pointed me in those two directions. It was either play the best deck that's really good at going tall, or play the best low to the ground deck, and those are really the two choices that I kind of put myself in heading into it. But yeah, the format, I don't think it can ever truly be solved due to the card diversity that we have right now. The card pool is so gigantic, but I think if you just start with like looking at the two opposite ends of the spectrum and then working backwards from there, you'll be able to find all the decks that kind of fit in between.
For sure. Dude, you sold out, man. You sold out. You weren't supposed to play Storm. No, dude, honestly, going back in time, I really, really wish I played Storm. Like, knowing what I know now, obviously it's hindsight, but Storm really was the skill pick. Like, Storm, you didn't have an unwinnable matchup, and that's kind of one of the problems I have with the format right now. Especially like I went X2-1 round 5 and I dropped, even though I could have still got that top 50% prizing potentially. But like the format wasn't really enjoyable to play in because of the fact that you had auto loss matchups. We talked about this a little bit at the house. Like you could sit down across from your opponent. You could be the better player than them, but I mean, if you're playing against that bad matchup, it's like 90-10 still. So I mean,
the best way to kind of put it was, so like I sat down for round 1 and I sit at my table. I'm playing Storm, so I already hate my life as it is. But then my opponent is also playing Storm, and they win the dice roll. And then I look to the right of me, and it's Brian Samuel to my right playing Shinron, playing against his best matchup with it, which is Hercule. And then to my left, it's Krillin Storm playing against the Shinron deck. So again, his best matchup. And I'm sitting here like, why am I playing a mirror? Why am I going second? Like, so it's like immediately I just felt like, wow, this is this is just the nature of the format. Like you're gonna run into, either you're gonna be the guy that gets the right string of pairings and goes all the way, or you're not. So for instance, like Brandon Scott, young badman who made top 32 with Red Blue Vertigo, his worst matchup is Storm, didn't play against it all day.
Must be nice.
Right?
Wow,
Exactly.
That's even better than me.
Yeah, you only had to play it twice.
Yeah.
And you were able to squeak out a win against one of them. But again, it's just that nature of the format. I felt like the format for Nats was pretty matchup based. I think that'll change going forward as we have more data. But Nats, it really just was going to be the person with the best pairings through, Swiss through Top Cut was going to be the person that ended up winning the event. I mean, look at Pat O'Neill's run. He had an amazing run on day 1, but then he ran into his worst possible matchup in top 32 and then got steamrolled.
Yeah.
Like it was just the nature of the format, man. It was a rough day.
Yeah, for sure. I like part of my deck decision as well is like of course Storm was just awful like in testing. It felt like it was literally like 1090, like it was that bad.
Yeah,
like,
it
not
really
even
does.
like 2080. It was like awful. But at the same time, it was like you're testing against someone that knows like what they're doing.
Correct.
And plus the other testing of pretty much every other deck, droids, Janemba, Gogeta Shenron, like all the other decks, even a Chain Attack Zeno we tested, and it was just like overwhelmingly positive. Like I really felt like that was like one of the big decisions for me, is like I knew like, because I just mapped out every matchup as like in depth as I could, and I knew if I sat across from someone that wasn't Storm, that I have a very high chance of beating them because I like of what I tested.
Yeah, totally. And I think that Storm, if you chose to play Storm, I think that kind of mitigates that overall effect on the format, because like I said, I think it doesn't really have too many auto loss matchups. But yeah, and I hate to have this conversation because it almost feels like we're trying to take away the people that topped and the people that won, and that's not. I don't think that's what any of us are trying to get at all. I mean, and look at the finals. It's a Storm mirror match, so it kind of proves what I said. Like picking Storm was a skill pick, and that really mitigated that experience over the format. So congratulations to everyone on the top. Congratulations to Jordan Markle, 100%. Totally deserved wins, but we saw a lot of players that probably deserved to place higher than they did that didn't. And I think that's just the nature of the format. So,
yeah.
Oh, you were gonna say something, Danny?
Yeah, it's like, I faced 2. That's not. I think that's a reasonable number. I didn't face 0. That would have been pretty crazy. Like Storm wise.
Yeah.
It was just insane for me. Like the feeling I had when I sat down in the 9th round in the winning to top 32, and I saw Harudegarn get put on the table, and my heart just dropped. Like I was like, damn, this sucks.
You're just like you're just praying to Zeno that like this guy's playing like the Harudegarn main deck.
Oh, I was hoping. I'm like, oh, can it just be like red, blue, or something, please?
Yeah, and then what's really interesting is I ended up going to Hercule because I mentioned in a video the other day that I was testing Soul Striker and Shenron Blue Yellow the most, and like you guys both said, like Shenron Blue Yellow is just abysmal against Storm, and I was having a real tough time against Storm with Soul Striker as well. and I really wasn't confident in those picks. So, you know, I fell back to Reliable. I went with Hercule, and you know, you guys gave me an updated list, which was a really solid list. But Hercule actually, I think, is in a really interesting position in the format, because last format, I feel like Hercule was arguably best deck, a very, 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 very like defined, probably second best deck next to Storm, if anything. But the fact that it just hard countered Storm so much, and the fact that it just like it, I found it really easy to outplay androids with that deck last format, which this format was a totally different matchup. And then it just feels like it just felt like the best mid range deck. So now I feel like it's in a position where it really only hard counters Storm, but every other single mid range deck just got so boosted from set 5. What do you think about that, Matt?
Correct. Yeah, no, I agree. That's the reason why I didn't play Hercule for the weekend, and the reason why I was never really on Hercule through all of our testing, even though a lot of members of our team were kind of forcing it. The main reason why is because every single time I played a big Shinron deck against Hercule, I still haven't lost a game to Hercule playing as Shinron.
Yep.
And that matchup is just awful
for
Hercule.
It really is.
And then on top of that, it wasn't necessarily that the droids matchup got, like, I don't know, it's not anything that's like too crazy, but just the existence of Deadly Defender for
that
2
was
energy.
It. Yep, that was it.
Yeah, like that is the one thing that kind of took Hercule and just put him on his heels, because now he has to deal with this. He has to deal with this barrier, you know, defender card every single turn, and if he can't, or even if he does, another one just gets jammed. And then on top of that, you have the 4-drop Android 17 that comes in, that's a barrier blocker that kills a thing. And then all of a sudden, the cell chain deck can just wait until the last possible moment to where the cell chain is relevant and then deploy it after they've made you waste so many resources trying to get through the Deadly Defenders and the blockers. So that matchup got way closer. To the point where, again, I just don't feel confident taking a Hercule deck to a tournament now. And it's also one of those things where it's like, the thing that made Hercule so good last format was that since the deck was new, not a lot of people knew how to play against it or how to plan for it.
Yep.
And whereas now, like, people have plans. Like, if I'm playing Storm, I have a plan of how I'm beating Hercule. And then on top of that, Hercule already has just like a terrible matchup against Shinron. So it's already starting itself off in a weird place. And then I know that the red-blue Harugarn got closer with Hercule, not because of anything other than Dimension Magic allowing me to play a foreseeing hit when I'm at 5 life, then Dimension Magic my opponent for free, then Chain Zeno them the next turn after I've just pressured with a foreseeing hit to force them to awaken. So like there's a lot of cards that just kind of got introduced that just caused Hercule just to be in an awkward spot.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you guys think about the Oob pick by some of our teammates? That was like way out of left field for me, because I didn't hear about anyone testing it, period. And I get the premise. It's supposed to be better against Janemba because the Pan can just punch over Vegeto's. But what do you guys think about the Oob pick by some of Shenron's Lair?
I felt like it was an overreaction.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, they were losing the matchup to Janemba, and I think that they panicked and overreact, and so they wanted to get off of strategies that were actually going to end up being better in the long run. Yeah,
I can see that. You talked about that yesterday in your video too, kind of just getting too wrapped up in the data, right? Like just seeing like too many bad matchups, like and Danny kind of just talked about it too, like you're just getting smoked by one matchup so much that you just like need to gear everything towards that matchup. That's pretty interesting. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's actually
pick, Danny.
Yeah, that's actually interesting too, because like my team pretty much did the same thing as they did. Like they overreacted. Like you know, a bunch of them were working with me like for the same amount of time, the week, 2 weeks almost on the deck, and you know we had the data, like we were winning every other matchup except Storm. But then like you know when we started testing a lot of Storm and winning 1 game out of 10, they overreacted and they're like, let's just play Storm, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So,
but the Oob pick, I played Marcus the night before, and his Hercule deck was actually like he hedged it to play decently against Shenron, which I really liked. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's like too much like going against Hercule in general, like Crisis Crusher and all that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the main things, like me playing the matchup, like on Saturday, was like their leader just not touching you for 4 turns was just terrible. Like you had to get Source of Power on board, you had to get at all costs on board just to get yourself flipped, and then by that point, your opponent's on 5 energy for their win con. So that was absolutely nuts. So let's talk about Janemba Mill a little bit. I have a Yu-Gi-Oh background. I don't know the first thing about mill in a metagame until now. So I'm actually kind of interested to hear you guys from both coming from kind of a Magic perspective. How has mill kind of influenced that game, and how does that maybe translate to Dragon Ball Super now in terms of like maybe the power level of mill in Magic and the power level of mill in Janemba? Danny, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I didn't actually see that much mill. Most most mill I saw in Magic was like Nephalia Drown Yard, and that's like extremely long game. Like you literally just it takes forever to win. So that's much different also in Magic because there's more drop area or graveyard kind of interactions. Like in Dragon Ball, it's much less. World Peace is like pretty new,
Right.
but if you're not playing Shadowrun Leader, then you're just gonna overwhelm it a lot of the time.
I know that one. That one's Monster Reborn. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things about Janemba is all the decks are really streamlined, and plus in the main difference from Dragon Ball and Magic is in Dragon Ball you draw really, really fast. So you're essentially just killing yourself faster. Like my deck personally, I kill myself really fast because I was playing Explore Bulmas and just digging through my deck. So I would die on turn 4 or 5.
Right.
So, yeah.
What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, so I actually don't really relate a mill in this game to be compared to like the way it is in Magic. I think in this game, mill is like a hyper control strategy that's very similar to almost something like Lantern Control in Magic, where basically you're trying to make it to the point where your win condition is something that they can't interact with, and you're really just trying to control them by basically forcing them to come at you and then not being able to really do anything about it. So that's why you play tons of defensive cards. You're trying to play tons of combo cards. You're really trying to make it so they just can never get through this wall, which is almost like your ensnaring bridge, which is a card in Magic that basically says your opponent's creatures that basically cost equal to or less than equal to or more than the cards in your hand basically can't attack. And so all you're trying to do is just basically stick your Vegito, which is like your ensnaring bridge, and then just defend that so the opponent can never do anything. And so in this game, Janemba kind of acts as just a check to the more degenerate strategies within the format, and at the same time just provide inevitability within the leader itself, which is what I think it's so cool. But going into the event itself and playtesting the deck a lot, I had a really good conversation with Jose about the deck. And it was the reason why he ended up choosing to play Storm instead of Janemba Mill. And I told him that when you're playing Janemba Mill, it's like, I call it that you're using the hope strategy. Like you're like, I hope my opponent doesn't draw well, or I hope my opponent misplays, or I hope my opponent doesn't realize actually how to beat me, or I hope my opponent doesn't know how to manage resources. Like you're hoping all these things kind of go your way for you to be able to live long enough to win the game.
Right.
Like, and so that's just not a strategy that I like taking into any major competitive event, because you're not doing anything to win the game. You're just trying not to lose.
Right. Yeah. So question then, do you think that, I think some people might think this, I'm not sure where I kind of stand on it yet, but do you think that the Janemba Mill deck is degenerate?
Oh, no, not by any means.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it's...
Go ahead, Danny.
I think it's more so like just kind of like annoying because you like the RNG of them mill, like they could just mill like Victory Strike, it's kind of just, it feels random, it doesn't feel like you're in control of it during the games. It just seems annoying,
Totally. Like playing any burst leader is really strange because, like, damn, I just milled a super combo and an unyielding Spirit Trunks. Like, it feels so bad. Like, mill in this game, there's like Danny said, there's not a lot of graveyard recursion outside of like wish decks. So self mill already feels weird enough. Milling your opponent can be very controlling, like Matt said, because you can mill your opponent's Victory Strike, you can mill your opponent's win cons. Like, I literally sided in Hercule more win cons in case Janemba milled out my win cons. So, and I think that's actually a really cool check on decks that do turbo through their hand, because we talked about the fall of Hercule, and I think one of the big reasons Hercule was able to be so good was because it could just have this massive hand size. Like, no other leader was, holding 15 cards in their hand on average. And Janemba kind of punishes that, and Cell Chain punishes that as well. but Janemba might just, well, probably definitely is a less degenerate version of controlling that matchup, where Cell Chain is just like, oh, sorry, you lose, 17 cards. But yeah, so that's a pretty interesting point.
If you ever want to watch a game of Magic, that'll kind of teach you about how two control players approach a matchup differently, and how one control player knows that deck out is a win condition. So instead of actually trying to avoid decking out, he actually forces himself to power through his deck faster so he can get to win conditions faster than the opponent. And so you kind of have to, like, if you watch it, it's basically Shota Yasuoka versus Carlos Ramao. It was from Pro Tour Kaladesh. It was the finals. And game one, Shota chooses to be on the draw to draw the extra card, and then plays a bunch of draw spells just to get through his deck, to find his attacking lands, to find his torrential Gearhulks, to find his, anything that could be a threat, to eventually run out Carlos Ramao out of removal or counter spells. And then he ends up winning that game with barely any cards left in deck, because he realized this from the start of the matchup. And when you're playing against Janemba, you kind of have to have that same mentality where you need to get them dead. Like, and you need to have a plan to do so. And if you don't, that's why you lose the matchup. It's not because the deck is oppressive. It's because you didn't actually have a plan of how you were going to win the game.
That's really true, because that's how I when I was testing against it, I realized really quickly, like, you shouldn't, like, the new Bulma Turner pack where it puts the cards back into your deck. Like, that's probably like the first card that comes in mind. Like, I can just counter the build by putting that in. But like, when I was playing, I'm like, I should just try to kill them. Like, I never. You want to be playing your own game. You don't want to be playing their game. You're pretty much the longer the game goes, it's just more and more their favor. They have more energy. They'll have Vegetos out. But really, like, my deck drew a lot, and that I just realized that I don't care. I'm gonna probably die anyways if the game goes past turn 5. So I should just dig for my pieces to win the game as fast as possible.
Yep. Yeah, it happened I played in the Gunslinger tournament when I was playing my Child's Wish deck. My plan was to get a quick thinking Go Tanks and a sneak attack Vegeta on board at the same time, put my opponent within kill range of an add-all cost Vegeta, and then kill them before I decked out. That was the plan.
Totally, yeah.
And I followed it perfectly, and I killed him with a few cards left in deck, and it was exactly what I needed to do. Like, but I had a plan going into the game, as opposed to just trying to figure it out on the fly.
Yeah, that's how I actually played I played 3 Janemba. That was like my most prevalent matchup during this weekend, and that's how I killed them every time. Like, I was close to deck out every time. Like, literally the turn after, I will lose. Like, every time I've played it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, coming from my Yu-Gi-Oh background, like, I played Yu-Gi-Oh competitively for 5 years, and one of my kind of quote unquote like mentors in the game was always telling me, you can't play not to lose, you have to play to win. And you guys just gave some good examples of that. And I think that is kind of what sets apart some players from like the casual mindset to the competitive mindset. So I think that's a really, really good takeaway to take from that, is you got to play to win. You can't play to not lose. But that also kind of brings up another point that I've been talking about a lot this weekend, and it's one of my somewhat issues with the game, I guess you can call it. I think as time goes on and the card pool gets more expansive, I think this will be rectified, especially if we get more different types of counterplays. But at some points in this game, there's inevitability of losing at certain points, and I'm not really a super huge fan of that. Like in, for example, last format, the Hercule mirror match, whoever dropped Demigraph first, assuming there were no crusher balls involved, like you just lost the game, and that kind of sucks. And then facing down a certain matchup, like, oh, I'm playing Shenron, my opponent plays Harudegarn on the table, GG. Like, that's one of the things that I kind of hope the game starts to steer away from. But yeah, Matt, what do you think about that a little bit?
So I'm okay if you're playing a strategy or a deck that kind of creates inevitability as a win condition, and I'm okay with doing that or having inevitability as a thing, as long as there's counterplay to the inevitability. So say, for instance, like we were talking week 1 Hercule, right, where we made the Hercule deck that played Demigra, and week 1 our deck was best because it had Demigra in it, right, Joey?
Yeah.
Okay, and so the next iteration of that was other people, and including ourselves. We played yellow in the sideboard to have access to Crusher Ball for a lot of reasons, but also partially it was really good in the mirror, right?
Absolutely.
So then the next step from there was I started doing 1x minus Killy Zone in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard. And then so it's like you start doing these, you start leveling up each other. Like it's like we keep just trying to one up, or we're taking the next step, or we're thinking about the next thing. And that inevitability that used to be there from week 1 is no longer there. I think the issue that everyone has right now is that Storm is still Juggernaut. Like it's just it's still just the best thing you could possibly doing within the first 3 turns of the game. And when you have so many decks that can't compete within a 3-turn window, then you're gonna have a problem where that level of inevitability is just too damn strong. Like, when you play against Storm and you're at 4 or 3 life, they're gonna go all in on one attacker. You're gonna take the damage. Then they're gonna play a Mira, bad ring your counter, and then you just know it. Like the inevitability's there, and I think that to me is a problem, because that's a strategy that no one can interact with right now.
Yeah,
like there's no stopping it unless you just sack your opponent, or you out combo them because your opponent didn't check to see how many Sensu Beans were in your drop area. I'm talking about Chris Welch right now, who punted against Hercule. But there's no way to really counter it, and so that I have a problem with. But stuff like Shenron having a really good matchup against Hercule can actually win that matchup, but you have to rely on stuff like Gogeta 7 and just trying to get there fast, and you have to change the way you awaken. So I think stuff like that is fine, but I think the existence of Storm's inevitability is very degenerate. I do not like it.
What do you think? What do you think, Danny?
I can agree with that. It's like just playing card games in general. For many years, like I always tried to steer towards the deck that would give me the most opportunity to, like, I know I can win everything, because if I can just make the correct plays, like, I can win. I don't want too much RNG randomness happening. Like, I want to be able to skill my way out,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with that. I wish the entire game was like, I make a good play, I get rewarded, and I think a lot of times it is like that. I think, especially when it comes to raw advantage, like comboing correctly and deciding when to save battle cards or when to save damage. So I think the game does reward players a lot for that. But then we just brought up some examples of kind of the inevitability in the game in certain aspects.
Another card that I dislike very much is Gogeta 7, because it punished. Like, I played against it in testing, and so this is like when I first built my own Janemba deck, and that was a thing in my testing. And I'm completely outplaying my opponent. I'm out comboing him. I'm generating more card advantage by using my resources properly and spending my energy efficiently. And then all he does is he just plays a Gogeta 7.
Jam that 7.
And I'm just like, all right, okay. You wiped away every single piece of work that I've done to put myself in a winning position, all by playing one card that I can't interact with.
Exactly. Like, and you pointed out Storm as like one of the inevitability aspects of the game, and that's the other one, because it literally is inevitable because it has deflect and barrier. So
exactly.
That's one of the other. That's like probably the other polar aspect of inevitability in the game. And sometimes, I mean, maybe not sometimes, I would prefer if this game always felt like a chess match, like you just said, like setting up your opponent to lose the game. Like, I think last set, or maybe the set before, a lot of people would put the game this way: it's the game might end on turn 5, turn 4, but you set your opponent up to lose, or you set yourself up to win turn 2, turn 3. And I really like that. I think that I think that really rewards skillful play, and I want the game to definitely steer towards that direction. But another good point that Chris actually brought up to me one time was that the more you remove RNG out of the game, and the more you remove quote unquote like cheesy wins, the more you deter new players from the game, which I think is actually it's a fair point. It's a really interesting point. But then it's like, where do you draw the line between competition and skillful play? But
well, I mean, that's why Magic's so popular, is that even the casual can win because of the existence of Mana Screw and Mana Flood.
Right.
So, I mean, Magic has that same thing where it has a lot of RNG built into the game as well. And that causes the game to be accessible to everybody and allows, the Timmy at the tournament with his really bad deck to win a game over the Spike at the tournament who's really good at the game, just because the person could just get mana screwed. In this game, like, if I'm playing the Storm Mirror and my opponent is worse than me, but they draw all 4 Gotens and I draw 0, I'm probably losing that game.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Or if they draw all 4 Hoys and I don't, I'm just gonna lose that game.
Yeah, and I think sometimes like a lot of competitive players, like myself included, like, we don't necessarily forget we're playing a card game, but we wish it was a little bit less of a card game in terms of, we don't want RNG to screw us over. We want to feel dignified in the fact that we played well, but it is a card game at the end of the day, and that's just part of it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So, Danny, you agree that Storm is degenerate?
100%. Come on now. What do you think I tried to do this weekend? I was just
I know.
like Joey would say. I was just like dodging the storm.
I just wanted to confirm that point before I go to the next thing. So I actually have another video coming out on this very topic, so I won't talk too much about it. But I'll ask you guys, what do you think can happen to either balance Storm or remove it completely? Danny, why don't you take the lead on this one?
I actually never heavily thought about it. It's just there's too many degenerate things, but like Goten just feels like the worst. Just because, like, how many times that they just attacked, they didn't have an unyielding in their hand or a bean, and then they got it off of there. Like it filters through your deck, so you just see everything you need so fast, so consistently. It just feels awful because oh, they got the double strike. Oh, they needed the mirror. Like what? Like they just pulled what they needed out all the time. It never feels like they actually
have to work for
miss.
much.
Yeah, exactly. It filters way too fast, and I think that the Goten is a pretty big problem with that.
Yeah, and that's complemented by the leader discarding 1, drawing 2, the Bardock getting you a card every time you play it. Yeah, that's and Hoy just digging so far deep. Yeah, absolutely, totally agree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with Storm, I would say you either have to take Unyielding or Bardock the Progenitor or both. Like, it has to be one of those 2 cards, if not both of those cards. A Yielding Spirit Trunks just gives just such an easy way to abuse your energy that not everyone has access to, only blue leaders.
Yep.
And it's something that you can't interact with. Basically, they just Unyielding, they untap the energy, they're good. And then so if they have Unyielding and Bean in the same exact, they can untap energy up to 8 times. The thing that makes Unyielding worse than Bean is the fact Unyielding can untap any color, even if you're at 0 energy. So if you're tapped out, you can still pop up a yellow to play your Bardock again, which I think is too strong. And then of course Bardock the Progenitor just does too much as a card. Like, yep. it's a 1 drop, it's a 10k. It takes a life, so it basically draws a card, and then it has the ability to swap back to hand. So basically, you +1 off of your Bardock exchange, and then it got to swinging at your opponent, and then it swaps into a 2-drop. So it generates too many attacks for 1 energy. It can evolve into a 4-costing ape just by comboing. Like, the card just it's overpowered. Like, the card is just by itself. It breaks all the rules of what a typical 1-drop should be able to do. So I think it has to be Unyielding, Bardock, or both.
Yeah,
Scrambling Assaults on Goten is fine. Like, if my opponent has to pay 2 energy for a Goten, I'm cool with it.
Oh,
like, that
100%. 100%.
Do you think if Bardock wasn't around and just Grandpa, if Grandpa was the only 1-drop that did it, then things would be a lot different because they wouldn't be awakening as fast.
The deck wouldn't exist. The deck wouldn't exist. You wouldn't awaken as fast, and you wouldn't be able to pressure on awakened leaders with Grandpa. Not even comboing 1 card into Grandpa pressures an awakened leader. So I don't think the deck would exist. I definitely agree that Bardock is just over the top. This is one thing I didn't talk about in that video, so I'll kind of talk about it now. I would personally like to see Bardock be errated to only be playable with a lineage leader. I think that would balance it really well, because then you have a really good card for its archetype, which I think is fine because the archetype is not broken by any stretch of the imagination. But I also wouldn't mind seeing Unyielding go away, because like you said, Matt, it gives blue just that unfair energy advantage. Any deck, no matter what color your leader is, can play Bean, but only blue can play Unyielding, and I think that's one of the many things that puts blue way over the top. So I could definitely agree with both of those. One thing I thought that was kind of interesting, I just had this random thought before, and I looked at the Gemma leader and I was like, wow, this could have been a really cool win con for like any color outside of blue. Like I don't know, I wonder why they decided to put it into blue, because like if Gemma was a red leader, you give, you have Hercule, I guess, but you give red decks like another, I guess you give red a different identity, but again, it would probably be a little more balanced. I guess not to say that Gemma's broken. I don't really know where I'm going with this. I thought it would be really cool if Gemma was for another color, but yeah, I don't know. But
I would have preferred a mill strategy in green.
Yeah, just more of the control aspect of green. Yeah.
Yeah, but I see why. I do see why it's in blue. It's because of the access to the card Dimension Magic, which is basically plays into the strategy of being hyper defensive and energy manipulation. So basically, you can untap your Dimension Magic. You then have access to your Sensu Bean, etc. So I see why it's there, but I do think having something like Mill would have been really cool in green. But I mean, the only thing is now I'm really waiting for the moment where we start seeing like more discard pile hate, where you can basically remove cards or send cards in your opponent's discard pile to the warp. When that happens, that's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I mean, I think King Yemma was a good start in the right direction. I think it's really good hate against Wish decks. And I think if the format slowed down a bit, like AKA if Storm was to leave, King Yemma might be like actually a really legit side deck card for against different Shadowrun decks. But yeah, I think that's a really cool concept. Oh, here's another question from that same video that I have coming up. What do you guys think about that new 2-drop blue Goku that may or may not be coming to kill Storm?
You go ahead, Danny.
Yeah, I actually was talking to Zap earlier, and he pretty much hit it right on the head. It's just it kind of like any strategies that are trying to do like anything related to 2 drops or less are like just stifled by it now. And like I think like Crisis Crusher, it helped, but it didn't like solve the issue obviously, and it just pretty much made any red blue like Kaba intensifying trunk strategies like just unplayable pretty much, which is it's not great. I don't think it was a great way to handle like Storm if that's what they were trying to do.
Right. I kind of agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it gives. I think the card is going to be interesting because I know there's already counterplay to the card. You have stuff like the Vegeta that's coming out in the same set. You have something like Frieza biding his time. They can tap down a barrier with 2-drop or less. Then you have to swing at it with your leader, of course. So I mean, you have ways to kind of interact with it there. But I do think that having a card with that powerful effect is basically like Chalice of the Void in Magic, which is an incredibly powerful card in all the legacy formats, where you basically name a cost and then your opponent can't, use cards that cost that much. So being able to like cut off cards that cost 2 or less from attacking feels pretty powerful. It is a 2-drop, which I do like that they put it at a 2-drop, because basically what you're going to have to do, it's the same sort of like thinking when you play like something like Kami or Dende, is they're forcing you to give up an entire turn cycle to play a card. Like to play a card that's powerful that interacts with your opponent's strategy. And it's also narrow too. So it's like they're forcing you to do something. They're making you pay a price for putting that card into your deck. So I'm all for it, from a design perspective, because I like what it does. Because it's like, number one, yeah, it counters a strategy. But number two, I have to play a really narrow card in my deck. And I have to give up an entire turn without doing something that's going to be able to win me the game, especially if my hand's awkward or has a bad draw or something, So I'm okay with it. I like the existence of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty happy about it too. I mean, if it stops Storm, I mean, I'm really happy about it. I agree with what you said, Danny, that it sucks to like, your one drop Trunkses, your 1-drop Kabas, your 1-drop Crate Gohans, your Nails, they can't really swing, which it's kind of awkward. But then again, this card might just end up being a side deck that only comes in against Storm. But of course, why wouldn't you just bring it in against those 1-drop Reliant decks? So another like a kind of a bounce off question. What do you guys think? What do you guys think Crisis Crusher was meant to do? Because I don't think it, like, obviously it doesn't really stifle Storm all that much. They lose maybe like 30% of their attacks, but in the end it's just not enough. So I mean, what do you guys think Crisis Crusher was maybe meant to do, and what do you guys think it actually does in the format?
Matt, you go for it.
Right. I'll let you gather your thoughts, Danny.
Let the learned guy go.
So I think what Crisis Crusher was meant to do was it was basically meant to slow down the game, not necessarily in the perspective of Storm, but any deck that kind of relies on one drop attackers to be able to awaken themselves. Because the thing that causes games to really snowball is basically who can awaken first and generate card advantage off of it.
Yep.
And the existence of Crisis Crusher really slows a lot of those decks down. So, for instance, like me, I play 3 Crisis Crusher in a lot of the slower Shenron decks I play, not just for the Storm matchup, but really it's just for any deck that relies on 1-drops to attack to awaken. Like, and because it buys me 2 to 3 additional turns, and it causes the card advantage race to kind of stay at parity, if not keep me ahead. So, because since they can't awaken or they can't play cards to get them additional cards, and Shenron doesn't really attack, it just stifles a lot of strategies from doing a lot early. So I definitely think it's meant to be a control or mid-range card. I don't think it was specifically meant to target one deck. I think it was really meant to just kind of just give those slower strategies some sort of bridge to be able to get to their second and third turn against the more, normal awakening strategies. Even Hercule, using Awakening Talent Pan, the world martial arts leaders all have to use Awakening Talent Pan to awaken. So I think it was really just kind of meant to give mid-range and control decks a little bit more time to build towards their win conditions.
Yeah, dude, rip my announcer deck, man. But go ahead, Dan.
Yep, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. What I do like about Crisis Crusher is that neither player can attack with 1-drops, and I'm not sure why they didn't do that with that new Goku. Because it's like opponent only, and like another like to Magic. A lot of the effects that like stifle any like playing 4 or more or something, or playing any like artifacts like Stony Silence, it's for both players, right?
Yeah, it's for both players.
Yeah, exactly. Like all the Magic cards that like stifle like strategies, they affect both players. I'm not sure why the 2-drop isn't like Crisis Crusher. Like I can't attack. I have Fledgling Talent Pan out. I can't attack with it either. So it's like it's fair on both sides of the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you imagine Storm Mirrors in the set where that Goku comes out, and then like post sideboard, I'm on the play, I just side it in.
Right? Oh, that's
like I'm just like, all right, cool, you lose.
Yeah, that's freaking stupid. But
proceed to scoop.
Yeah, I mean, if the designers are one thing, it's dedicated to making sure the fan base is happy, which I'm happy about. Hopefully, that just starts to catch up with a little bit more of the design, and I think they're taking steps in the right direction. But yeah, guys, so I think this has been a really great discussion. Really, productive. That's not a word, but really productive. That's the word. Yeah, I mean, this is really good. It's going on for a while. I'm starting to get sick of you guys, so I'm going to sign off. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so this has been a really good discussion. Thank you guys so much for coming to join the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so thank you guys so much. Any shout outs? Anything you want to say? Wrapping up.
Go ahead, Danny.
Oh, shout out to my team, Wise Guys. Shout out to my sponsor, Guire Gaming, and no shout out to Joey, because the only reason why he invited me on here is because he was not happy.
Yeah, you heard it here first from the worst wise guy, guys. You heard it here first from the worst wise guy. And Matt, and your sign off.
Yeah, no, so, thank you guys so much for everything. I had an amazing time at Nats Weekend. Shout out to Shenron's Lair, team that is way better than Wise Guys, best team on the planet. And of course, shout out to the Scrub fam. I love you guys and I appreciate everything you do for me.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for joining. Thank you guys so much for watching. What, Danny, you gonna say something?
Do okay, bye.
You want me to do it? I'll let Matt do it.
No, you gotta do it. Gotta do it.
All right. I'll try. I'll try my best to muster up my inner Matt. Okay, bye.
God, that was so bad.